you need two things to have an air quality problem. You need a contaminant or some sort of pollutant, and you need a pathway to the occupant. You have to have both. If you don't have the pathway, it's not an air quality problem.
Welcome to the Flow Lab, the podcast where we dive deep into the science of building performance and HVAC innovations. Today we bring you another insightful episode aimed to enhance your knowledge and expertise in the field. Joining us are your co-hosts, Ben Walker, co-CEO of Retrotec, and Sam Myers, a renowned building science specialist and Retrotec trainer. Together, they bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to ensure our discussions are both informative and engaging. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to enter the Flow Lab, where we'll explore the world of building performance. Let's get started.
Oh, nice to meet you, Brantley. I don't think we've ever met.
Yeah, man, it's nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thanks again for being on here. Oh, yeah,
of course.
You guys might have met briefly at HVAC school last year because you both were there.
Maybe, but
yeah, I was probably busy calibrating gauges.
That's right. And the wind was picking up, so you had to go run those inside. Yep,
yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah, but no, that was a good time. That was my first time actually being there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was like, oh man, I'm never gonna miss another one.
Yeah, it's tons of good content, and everyone's cool there and stuff.
Super fun. So, but yeah, you guys have been the backbone of our investigations for the past, 5 to 7 years now. So,
oh, it's awesome. I didn't know much about you before, and then just doing a little research, and then I see this, like, how moldy your resume is. I thought.
I know, right? Yeah, it's so funny. I've tried to change my everyone's thought of me. They're like, oh yeah, you're the mold guy. I'm like, man, can't I be something else? Can I be the building science guy? Can I be the something else guy? I have to be moldy. Yeah.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
I know someone's got to take the moldy badge, but yeah. So that's one of the things that I was talking to Sam about. I was like, man, something we could probably get into today is how we utilize y'all's equipment for building forensics and air quality inspections.
That'd be awesome,
because so many people use it for, home diagnostics with home performance, right? Energy efficiency, but it's so much more than that. And so it's funny, like people will call us and they'll say, I want a blower door test. And I'll be like, why? Right, yeah. Oh, well, what happened was someone came over, they found mold in my house. They think there's some sort of pressure imbalance. So they told me to find someone to do a blower door test to figure out what the pressure imbalance is. And I'm like, yeah, that's not exactly how it works, but yeah, let's go back a little bit. We'll probably utilize a blower door during our investigation, but this is where we get to the difference between a blower door being a service and a blower door being a tool, right? And we have to kind of like break that down.
Yeah, I love that. I know for a lot of people that might just be barely introduced to blower doors, they kind of think of it as the tool for making houses energy efficient, right? They're like, oh, that's the energy test, because I've heard so many contractors around here call it that.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about the whole concept of an airtight building, is because it prevents and solves so many problems, and the blower door just falls in line with that to either help prevent problems or figure out why they're being caused. So, we've had a lot of people on the podcast talk about it from a new construction standpoint. We've had a few people talk about it from an indoor air quality standpoint, but probably not as deep of as a dive as you're about to go into, is how you use it as a diagnostic tool to figure out why is mold growth happening? We know what causes that, right? It's a symptom of something getting wet. Okay, well, why? Why is it getting wet? And so I've seen a lot of your videos that you've been posting here recently of all the different houses you've been going into and all the funky stuff that's been going on. But help us kind of connect the dots, right? So like when you first started out into this, when you were first trying to solve these problems, how did you get introduced to blower doors, and now how do they become part of your business?
Well, I got introduced through one of my mentors, Krishna. He's a mechanical engineer, and I remember I went on this one job, and this was about a decade ago, and some funky stuff was going on, and mold growth was occurring due to condensation, but I didn't really understand why, like what was going on. And I understood the concept of condensation to a small degree because I did water restoration. So I understood psychrometrics to a certain degree, but it was confusing. And I called my buddy Dave at the time, and I was like, Dave, something weird's going on. Whenever the AC's running, we could see air getting pulled in from the windows, and put a tissue there, and it's just really bad. And I don't know what's going on. He's like, oh yeah, it's makeup air. The house is going to negative. And I was like, what the hell is makeup air? Like, never heard about it in my life. And so I was so interested in it. I told the homeowner, I said, look, keep me updated on what's going on here. Homeowner is super cool. He calls me up and he says, hey, I have this engineer to come out. He specializes in this stuff. Do you want to come be here with it for this? And I went out and I saw this investigation, this first time seeing a building forensics investigation, tracking down these pressure imbalances. And he used a blower door. And I'd never seen one before. And obviously he wasn't using it to figure out what the pressure imbalances were. He was figuring out the pathways and how bad it was. And so that was my first experience with it. And then flash forward into this like rabbit hole of investigating, like learning more about this. And I come across Joe Stiebrick. I take building science classes, and then, now here I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you just kind of came across the right person at the right time, and then in the rabbit hole you went.
And I will say too, like, the only reason I know what I know is because, you have to be diligent. Like I could have said, oh, that's weird. Anyway, here's your report. Have a good day, sir.
Yeah. Right.
But instead, the tenacity to say, no, you need to keep me updated. Let me know. Please keep me updated on what's going on. Call him up. He's like, hey, yeah, I know you were really eager. Yep, I'll be right out there. Right. And then what I didn't tell you was that there was years, literally like 2.5 years after that, where I told Krishna, I want to be at every inspection. Like I'll do free air samples. I will write the report, the protocol. I'll help you set up the blower door. And it was 2 years of just following him around, totally separate companies, just to learn more about what this is. Like what is he doing? Why, how is he utilizing the tools? Like learning more about mechanical systems, because there's not great training on, like, at least there wasn't at the time, like building performance as a mechanical system and how to identify pressure imbalance issues and airflow diagnostics. We have a few guys, but, so being able to follow him around was huge. And the fact that you have to go out, like no one's going to come to you and say, hey, do you want all this free information? And even if you do get that, you still have to put the time in to actually learn it. Right. It's like learning a language, right? Like all the information is out there. I'm a huge language learner. So I could tell you, like, everyone's like, oh man, like I start practicing language. I start using a language, like, must be nice. I'm like, well, nice is a weird way to put it. I've been practicing an hour a night for the past 3 years, but yeah, sure. It's, I guess it's luck. You know what I mean? And so it's the same thing with our skills at work, right? Like you only get out what you put into it.
Yeah. So when you get called out to projects, who's usually calling you? Is it homeowners or is it other contractors that need help? Is it a mixture?
It's a mixture. Yeah. Most of the time it's homeowners. And the routine kind of goes like this. A mold inspector goes out, they identified an issue. They can't figure out what's going on. The homeowner's already been through, 2 HVAC guys coming out, 1 contractor, 2 home inspectors, and possibly even an engineer. And nobody can really figure out what's going on. And eventually someone's like, oh, you got to call this guy Brantley, or maybe they find me on Instagram. Sometimes if they're lucky, before they spend all the money, the mold inspector knew me and he says, I don't know what's going on, call Brantley. Because, we do a lot of training for mold inspectors and stuff. So that's a big source. And then of course, social media is a big one where homeowners are saying, I'm seeing that exact same problem in my house and no one's been able to tell me what's going on. And so that's where we usually get the phone calls. But there are also contractors that reach out to us too, people that really just want their buildings to work well. And they'll call us and they say, yeah, we've been having this weird issue. Can you come out and take a look at this new construction home we just built?
Yeah. So one thing I've seen that's pretty consistent with a lot of the mold inspectors that I've spoken to. And I was just at the National Home Performance Conference in Columbus, Ohio. And I got to speak to a couple that were there because they were just, kind of got introduced to the building enclosure side of things and wanted to know more, which was great. Because what I usually see is like, okay, well, we can figure out if there's mold and then we can send a sample out to see what type. But a lot of times that's just where it stops. They don't really dive in to see like what caused it, why are the conditions the way they are for it to grow or anything further, because they just don't have that building science knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And then we do have mold inspectors out here that are actually really, really good, where they'll go out and they'll identify lots of issues. They're very thorough at the house, but they're looking for the most common like water damage indicators, staining, cupping, bubbling, swelling, active moisture on their moisture meter. And they'll find lots of stuff. But the problem is there's a big portion of that that's missing from either what they identify or from what they actually know what's causing these things, because they don't understand the building science. So, for example, we may go outside and look at a building and say, oh, man, look at the way this flashing is, right? This shouldn't be like this. Or look at this window install, or look at this whatever. Or look at this interstitial space, right? That's completely opened up to outdoors, where between the first and second floor is something we see a lot. Between the first and second floor, it's not conditioned, it's not air sealed, but it's connected to an overhang or it's connected to an attic or something completely exposed to outside in a hot, humid climate. And that does not present water damage. It doesn't present leaks, stains, swelling. It doesn't present any of the things that you see physically with your eyes. So if you don't understand building science, you just completely miss it. And there are so many people that are mold inspectors, good mold inspectors, that don't even look at the exterior of the building because they're like, well, we're indoor air quality guys, right? We're going to go look for the stuff inside. And it's like, well, you can find and identify a lot of problems that have no indications indoors by looking at the defects and defaults of the building.
Yeah, because after all, our air inside comes from the outside in some shape.
Yeah, I mean, there's
understanding its pathways is important.
Yeah, of course, the air infiltration is huge and stuff, but there's three places where you get moisture, right? It comes from the sky, it comes from the ground, or it comes from utilities. And so, like plot twist, 2 of those 3 come from outdoors. Sometimes all 3 if you're dealing with like an irrigation or a faucet or something, a spigot from outside. So if you're dealing with rain and groundwater and you're not checking the exterior, there's something like you're missing 2/3 of the inspection.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's like in that first case that you mentioned with the house going negative and stuff. What was the discovery of why?
So that was actually really simple. It was just too much return, not enough supply in certain locations, right? So
is that why bedroom doors are shut?
Well, so with that one specifically, they had those hallways that sometimes have the sliding door, like the pocket doors.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Yeah.
So the return was in a hallway with a pocket door, and the customer always kept the pocket door closed. And that was the main return for the entire house. So that whole zone over there was under negative when the pocket door was closed because it was sucking all that return air from one side of the house. But actually like 70 or 80% of the supply vents were on the other side. So it wasn't getting any of that makeup air back. It was pulling it from the attic and from, these windows and stuff like that. And there was a lot of duct leakage. That was the first time I saw a duct blaster, like a duct leak test too. And there was a lot of duct leakage. So, when you have 20% duct leakage and a return on one side of the house that's blocked off from the rest of it, it's a recipe for negative air.
And the ducts are outside the envelope. That's
exactly.
Really throw that out of whack.
Yeah. It was nuts. And so, when I first saw that, it completely opened my mind to like root cause analysis and like why we need to be going deeper on these inspections.
And so he was like just using the blower door to go around, and like that's how he discovered the pocket door situation, just like some pressure imbalance. He just noticed in between that zone and another. It's like,
well, when you identify pressure imbalances, a lot of times you don't really need tools that much. Like for example, that you could just look at it and form a hypothesis. Okay, so the return is on one side of the house for the entire house, right? It's pulling 1,600 CFM of air. And then you ask the homeowner, how often do you keep this pocket door closed? And they say all the time. Now you've formulated this hypothesis like, okay, 1,600 CFM of suppliers or return air is coming from this section. And there's only maybe like 300 CFM of supply air. So this area over here is going to be under a huge negative because it's pulling so much. And then that's when you start testing your hypothesis and you run manometers and check, what's happening with HVAC off and on. And then the blower door, what that helps with is where are the penetrations, right? Is it coming from mostly the window? Is it coming from the attic? Can we quantify how air leaky the house is? And a lot of times when you know that a house has been under negative for a long time in a hot, humid climate, the areas that have the most air infiltration are the areas that are most likely to be causing mold growth, condensation.
Yeah.
So there was this one wall in particular, lots of air infiltration coming from the wall. Took out the wall, lots of mold growth in the wall. It's not a surprise that part of the house is under negative 24/7, at least as long as the air conditioner is running. And so wherever you're going to get 78-degree dew point air coming in and it hits a 70-degree piece of drywall, it's going to condense. And so that is the area that's largest at risk. And so, that's where you have to, this is where kind of the air quality meets the home diagnostics, right? Say, okay, well, if there's a lot of air infiltration in this area all the time, then by proxy, there's probably a lot of condensation over here all the time.
Yeah, the joys of living in the Southeast.
I know, right? It's so fun when you have a dew point of 80 degrees outside. So you walk outside with a room temperature bottle of water and it starts to sweat.
Yeah, your sunglasses fog up immediately when you walk out.
Exactly. Yeah. It's nuts. But yeah, so with the blower door, utilizing it as air quality stuff, it's not just mold. I mean, we had 2 just this week where we utilized the duct test and the blower door on just random air quality stuff. The first customer, they had issues with an abnormal, unknown particulate. It was like a white, powdery dust they couldn't identify, and it didn't happen until they installed a new HVAC system and a new duct system. And so, of course, my question is, what exactly did they do? Did they change duct locations? Because now I'm thinking, did they cause pressure imbalances? Is the new ductwork leaky? What's going on? And their main concern was respiratory issues because of this weird white particulate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go do a duct blaster in there. I'm going to depressurize it and see if I can see if any of that particulate's coming in. And then I also want to see what the duct leakage is and where I can find that duct leakage. Is it pulling something that it shouldn't be? And then, of course, we want to run a blower door test, too, to see if there's any pathways that are pulling it in. We can measure particulate counts as we're running blower door. So that's a great way to kind of identify pathways, right? Because whenever you have an air quality problem, you need two things to have an air quality problem. You need a contaminant or some sort of pollutant, and you need a pathway to the occupant. You have to have both. If you don't have the pathway, it's not an air quality problem. It's like if I had a titanium sealed box in the middle of the room and it was filled with toxic mold. Well, if it's a titanium sealed box, nobody's at risk, right?
Exposed, yeah.
So if you have to have the pathway, you have to investigate the pathway, and that's what the blower door test helps us do. And then the second job that we had was a lady that was complaining about her neighbor. It was a townhome, so it was a shared wall. Her neighbor with cigarette and marijuana smoke, and she's like, "I'm sure that it's coming from them. My HOA assures me that the firewall is going to keep us separated, but I smell smoke. I smell, every night." And so what do? We go in there and say, here's the plan. We're going to run a blower door, figure out where those pathways are. We're going to check for pressure imbalances by looking at the HVAC system design, your range hood, click it on, what's the makeup air like, all the stuff, right? What are the pathways? And then we're also going to do an ETS, an environmental tobacco smoke test. It's a thermal desorption tube. You send it to a lab. They could tell you how much like dimethylfuran and nicotine and, all these other things that could be in the air due to marijuana and cigarette smoke. And you combine your industrial hygiene with the testing and the air sampling with the diagnostic tools that you guys have. And that is what you need to do a holistic investigation. You can't just go in there and take a test and say, yep, there is smoke getting in here. Okay, so how do I solve it? Where's it coming from? What do I do about it? What's the proof that it's coming from my neighbor? And in order to get the documentation and a good report, you have to have both. And so this is where, again, using these tools more than just an energy audit is crucial.
Yeah, how do you do that kind of work safely, really? Like you're not going to harm yourself or make the residents worse or whatnot?
So it's very hard. So sometimes whenever you have a job and we've already identified a mold contamination, we usually come in after the protocol is written, and there's already a protocol that the whole house needs to get decontaminated. It's an exposure risk. So we usually don't have occupants, and we usually already know the house has to get decontaminated. So when we come in to do a blower door test, we know when we depressurize that house, there is a chance that we're pulling in more things. However, this was already happening, right? We're just doing a very short window of experiencing it. That way we can document it, identify it, and actually solve the problem. So it's what I would consider a necessary evil. But we're also a lot of times not running the blower door at 50 pascals. We can do this at 10, 15, just to identify these pathways and figure out what's going on. If we need a score for whatever reason, which surprisingly a lot of times we don't because it's just more qualitative, we'll kick it up to 50. We'll get the number real quick and kick it right back down. So so we try our best. Now, if we're dealing with something really dangerous, we just can't use it. Right? Like we're not going to be like, let's see if this carbon monoxide comes in, We're not going to do that. Yeah. But yeah, like smaller exposures, you kind of have to. And you explain like, hey, look, this is just something that we have to do if you want to get answers.
Do you ever flip the fan around to do a positive pressure test if you need to, just so that you're pushing contaminants out and not in?
We do, but it doesn't give us the same answers, So
they
it can
leak
be
differently
useful
in different directions usually.
Exactly. So. Yeah. And you can't document most of what we do is in litigation. So, for example, if I'm seeing an interstitial space, right, and I've cut a hole in the ceiling to show you that air is coming in from this unsealed cavity from outdoors, it works much better in your documentation and your report that will go to an attorney when I hit the smoke pin up there and it's coming towards you, right? It just clicks for people.
Showing that air coming in.
Yep, exactly. And so that's huge. But there are situations where we also run it under positive, just specifically because we want to know what's going on under positive, especially in winter climates, right? When people, the dew point in the air in a winter climate might be 40, but then the temperature outside could be 0, right? And so that positive pressure could cause condensation in the opposite direction. So yeah, there are situations where we flip it. If we're dealing with really, really sensitive clients, we either run a positive or we just don't do the blower door test at all. We may try to do like a mini version where we'll kick on the range hood and see if we can get 5 to 8 pascals, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's where something like the Solo comes in handy, or just your DM32X alone, where you can just kind of use the fans that are in the house and just try to replicate what the homeowner's been doing, and then just measure what happens in real time.
Yeah, the Solo is our go-to when we're doing those investigations. It's funny because the Solo is used on every single one of our standard mold inspections too. It's just part of what we do, checking room-to-room pressure imbalances, checking what happens when the range hood kicks on, exhaust fans. If we're doing our second level, which is like our indoor environmental investigation, so we have our mold, right? We're just looking for mold and moisture. Then we have an indoor environmental. Well, now we're using the manometer in more situations, like, for example, checking static pressure of the unit. And then we're doing like CAS testing, right? So the combustion appliance zone, what happens when that goes under negative? Is it going to pull stuff in from, the open vented water heater? And the Solo has been huge because before that, I was kind of nervous because, I'm walking around with this $2,000 manometer. Yeah. It's funny, actually, since I've gotten the DM32X, though, it has replaced the Solo in some of these things because I have the graph. And I don't know why, I just love that graph when I can awesome. Go room to room, and then I just close doors and I do this and I do that. I change zones and you could see it happening and it's logging it. It's amazing.
Yeah, just having that history from the past few minutes is helpful just to kind of see those trends of how things have changed.
Yeah, because you walk away and you're doing things and you come back, you want to see what changed and what happened. Yeah, and you could just snap a picture for the report. It's perfect. So I do actually find myself using it more often now, but the Solo is definitely one of the things that we keep in our everyday tool bag.
So I know you deal, so a lot of the reasons why you're called out, they're health related, right? I mean, that's the whole case behind indoor air quality and why we do what we do for this. But I feel like there's not enough success stories told in this industry of like what the homeowner was dealing with, what their symptoms was, and then how they were behaving afterwards.
Yeah.
I've got, a couple of my own examples, but I feel like just not enough of that is shared. Do you have anything like that from just like clients that had symptoms that went away, or maybe spending less on medical bills or anything like that?
We hear a lot of success stories. I think the reason that you don't hear a lot of success stories is because the success of that situation is directly tied to the competency of the professionals. So they get bad professional after bad professional after bad professional, not fixing the problem, not giving them good advice. Then they go to a dumb doctor that doesn't know what they're talking about, that's never experienced this, or they have a bias to a certain thing, right? And they don't get answers because they don't have good professionals around them and they're lost. And so a lot of times we hear these success stories based on, one, we also stick with our clients a little bit longer. So for example, if I were to fix a problem, we come out, we do a clearance assessment. And the clearance assessment is twofold, right? We go, is the mold properly remediated, right? So testing, is the visible dust gone, contamination's gone, sources are gone. But two, that HVAC design that we put in place, the building envelope that we sealed up, is that now where it should be? So we do HVAC diagnostic tests. We check, the spray foam. If they spray foam, let's run a blower door again, make sure that they sealed it properly, whatever. And we measure the success. And then we say, okay, well, since this problem was huge and cost you a lot of money and time and stress, we're going to check on this in 6 months, right? So we come back, we're running data loggers in the house, we're checking these things again now that the house is fully put back together, and we're ensuring, okay, like if this does happen again for whatever reason, we're going to catch it early. And that's usually the time when the homeowners are like, we've been feeling so much better, or my kid has been sleeping, or the behavior issues are gone, or whatever the case may be, we hear. And so it is a matter of just finding the answers and solving them, but it's also a matter of like following up with your clients. Sometimes these people probably are doing better and no one's checking back with them. But at the same time, I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups for toxic mold issues and other issues. And sometimes these things are a lifelong struggle. When you're dealing with chronic Lyme or SIRS or mold related illnesses, you could be sensitive for a while, and it takes a little bit to figure out what works for your body.
Yeah.
Like what are some of the symptoms for like a long-term mold exposure and stuff really?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I can really only go by what literature tells us about the molds and mycotoxins we come across, and of course anecdotal from our customers. But there's 3 types of effects that usually come from mold. You have the allergenic effect, you have the pathogenic effect, and then you have the toxigenic effect. So they could be a wide breadth of symptoms, right? So the allergenic effect is the stuff that we all think of, right? The itchy nose, eyes, kind of like tension headaches and stuff, maybe even like a low-grade fever, things if you're dealing with like allergies over a long period of time. Then you have the pathogenic effects, which pathogens are things that come in and infect you. Like you are a living host to this organism. So if you actually had mold growing inside of you, that could be very different. So there's one, for example, called aspergillosis. Is when aspergillus can get in your lungs and actually grow a fur ball of hyphae and mycelium, which is like the root-like structures of mold, into your lungs and really cause some nasty damage, usually only affecting people that are immunocompromised. But that's actually much worse than an allergy effect, and it has a very high mortality rate if it's caught late. This is actually one of the most common infections after like organ transplants, because what happens is after the organ transplant in the hospital, they put someone in a room, they put them on immunosuppressants so their body doesn't reject the organ. And then all of a sudden this one little aspergillus spore comes in, goes into their mouth, and it's just like game over. And so it could be very dangerous. So you have those 2 types, but then you have the toxigenic effect, which is really what we deal with most often when you're dealing with a chronic long-term exposure in a house. And those are the things that are literally like poison, right? So a toxigenic effect is different in that when a toxin goes into your body, it can disrupt something that your body does. So our body creates proteins for all sorts of stuff, right? It gets amino acids, it builds them into proteins, and these proteins are building blocks for everything that our body does, right? Obviously to grow muscle, but also for neurotransmission, for our GI system, for nerves, whatever it is. A lot of these mycotoxins, these mold toxins, they can come in and disrupt that. Like literally put a stick in the cog. And imagine if your body just can't produce these proteins anymore. It's going to go haywire. It could be anything. It could be brain fog. It could be nervous system issues. It could be GI symptom issues. It could be eye issues. It could be behavioral issues. It could be so many different things. And what happens too is your immune system starts going crazy. And then it's a cascading effect of now being more sensitive to other things because of the toxins that your toxic bucket is so loaded. So we see a lot of times with our customers, they had no problems with pretty much anything. And then they start dealing with mold toxicity. And now all of a sudden they can't wear their perfume anymore, or they can't go into, one of the Dillards or something because of the smells or whatever the case may be. They can't go through the car wash. And so now they're starting to get more sensitive to these other things. Pollen is now a problem for them. Never used to be. So the toxigenic effect is pretty insane. And then what's worse if you're dealing with multiple, right? The allergenic effects and the toxigenic effects at the same time. Your body's constantly irritated. It's constantly fighting. You're not getting quality sleep, and it becomes a cyclical pattern. And so whenever we see customers that have these toxigenic effects, they can be very subtle. And for a typical mold inspector that's not in this world, right, the niche world of dealing with sensitive individuals, they're going to miss those telltale signs. They're going to ask, have you been sneezing in the house? How your eyes, blah, blah, blah. And all that stuff's fine for them, but they're dealing with brain fog, or their kid's been having behavioral issues. Well, that's totally under the radar for a typical mold inspector. They're not going to think that it's so non-specific. It could be 1,000 things. So
is there anything like that the homeowner could tools or methods that they could use to determine if they had mold in their home before calling an expert out like yourself?
It's always best to get a professional out and do an inspection, right? The problem is, like, there's a lot of DIY testing out there, but the DIY tests are, all sampling has pros and cons, and all sampling has limitations. And you can't expect to give a homeowner a DIY test that has so many limitations that maybe the information is hard to interpret and then get answers about their home. Even if, let's say you had the most accurate mold test in the world and magically it just told you exactly what your exposure was in the house, Well, you still need to
still
know
where the source and stuff is.
Where is it? What's causing it? How bad is it? What do I do about it? Yeah, all those things are still unanswered. And so a thorough inspection is best. We have a DIY homeowners course. It's like a field guide for mold inspections on our website, buildingscience.us. And that is basically for people that either A, cannot find a good professional in their area, and they need to use our checklist and go through the house and use all the tools that we're teaching on how to find the stuff. And then, or it's for people that maybe can't afford a mold inspector to come out, and they're just trying to get an answer. Especially people, we get a lot, renters, right? And they're trying to figure out if the rental's safe. They can't spend $800 on an inspector for every rental that they're just going to look at, So having those tools for yourself is huge. And a thorough investigation is always going to be best. If you can go in and identify where these mold problems are, how bad they are just by visual, a lot of times you don't even need a test, right? If I went into one of your houses and I said, oh, I found mold under your sink, I found it in your air conditioning system, I found it underneath this window, and I found it in the attic, I didn't need a test to do that. I found it all. I know what to do about it. Visual, know what to solve. It's all visual, right? So if we can give our homeowners those tools to do some of that, and then that'll help them decide, okay, maybe I should get someone to come out, or maybe I shouldn't get this rental, or maybe I shouldn't even go to the next step and put a contract on this house. So it's huge. But at DIY tests, they're expensive, and a lot of times they get people nowhere unless they pair it with a good visual inspection.
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue too into something else that you're getting into is training, right? You offer training and education to, I guess, anyone who wants it. I mean, there's so many different trades that this has to do with, and it's all interconnected. But definitely mold inspectors, anybody who's focusing on indoor air quality, and it's really hard to ignore HVAC contractors too, because a lot of times they're the ones that get the call for this kind of stuff. Because my air is bad. Who do I call about air? HVAC contractor usually gets it. So maybe talk about a little bit about the training side of your business that you'll be getting into, and maybe your approach to maybe taking someone who's already a mold inspector and how you might introduce them into the world of building science.
Yeah. Well, we have online courses and we have in-person courses. In our in-person courses right now, we do mold remediation, mold inspection. That's a course. And then we have one for indoor environmental. So that's a much more broad spectrum course of what is air quality? And that's when we go through bacteria and virus and gases and, all the stuff, not just mold. And in both of those, it is very, very heavy just by my nature, building science. You can almost call it a building science course about air quality because I believe that it really needs that. I mean, we have a chapter just on building science and air pressure. We have a chapter just on building science and moisture. We have a chapter just on psychrometrics and all that stuff specifically to help you identify air quality issues or mold issues in the house. And then of course we also have online training. We have a blower door course online. And so that way, if someone wants to get the biggest crash course they can on what is a blower door, how do I use it, and what are the pro tips, how can I use it? That's where we get into it, where a lot of the blower door courses out there, they're just teaching you how to do it for an energy audit. And we have sections on air infiltration, why it's important, condensation, using it for building forensics, tracking down odors, all the other things that it could be utilized for. And so, yeah, we're trying to merge the air quality and building science space because air quality has always been a pillar of building science. But for us, it's always the first thing. I don't care how energy efficient the house is if it's killing me. If I don't have ventilation in here, it's not helpful for me, right?
Yeah. So once you fix the indoor air quality, just let the energy efficiency be a positive byproduct of that.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And sometimes it's funny. We explain to people, hey, you can do this thing, and there's two paths. One, sometimes, most of the time, if you fix an air quality problem, you're also fixing an energy efficiency problem, right? Yeah. If you're getting air infiltration from the attic that has roach poop, rat poop, fiberglass, heat, humidity, you're by proxy also stopping the heat and the humidity, making your air conditioner runtime less. So boom, awesome. There are some times, however, where increasing the air quality is an energy penalty. So for example, maybe we go into a house that's too tight and we say, look, I really think that would be helpful to have a fresh air intake, and it should be ran through a dedicated dehumidifier. This will be an energy penalty because you're bringing in Florida heat. Yeah. And but it's going to be floor to heat that's controlled. It's not coming through a wall somewhere. It's not coming from your crawl space. It's going to be dried, filtered, cooled, and then it's going to come in, and you're going to constantly have fresh air. Guess how many people care that it's an energy penalty when I tell them that? Zero.
Yeah.
They said, I just want to breathe good air.
And anyway, I mean, it could even balance itself out. You know, they were probably setting their thermostat down to 68. Yeah. Now that the air is drier because of the dehumidifier, they might be letting it run at 72, 73. So yeah, there's some trade-offs sometimes.
Yeah, we had so our previous house that we lived in for about a year and a half with my wife and I, she slept at 68 degrees. And we kept that house around 70. I'm already warm-blooded. I'm like a lizard, right? I like it warm. And she likes it cold. And in that house, it was always 68. And it was a clammy 68. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We moved into our new house. She's comfortable at 74. And she's like, what? Is the thermostat different? I'm like, no, it's 45% humidity.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You know? And we're not getting nasty stuff. It's just good air quality. And the air, you could tell when the air is clean. You know, like our bodies know it somehow, you know, when the particulate level is low, when the carbon dioxide level is low, and, you know, the relative humidity is good. And so she's comfortable at 74. And it's funny how the houses do that. And whenever we do heat load calculations, which for those of you not doing heat load calculations, it's basically a calculation to determine what size air conditioner a house or building needs. We usually do two. We'll come in and we'll say, okay, here's your heat load calculation for the problem at hand. Your air conditioner is oversized for the house. Right? Or whatever. Yeah. But we're fixing things, right? We might be sealing things up. We might be changing things. Ducts are coming into the interior space, whatever. Now we have to do a second heat load calculation. And almost always the energy efficiency gets much better. So we're like, you're already oversized. When we fix all these things, now it's really going to be oversized. Yeah. And so, when we fix these things for air quality, we also see that the energy efficiency improves most of the time.
Yeah. They go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah.
So I know one thing you've been getting into lately is you've been diving into duct testing a little bit.
Yeah,
we've chatted a couple times over the past couple of weeks, and and I think I've always kind of thought that's one of those things that's maybe kind of regional on how important it is. You know, up north and in the Midwest, a lot of folks have their ducts completely inside the building enclosure, but kind of where we live in the Southeast, we don't do that. We throw it in a vented attic or a vented crawl space. And so it's almost always outside.
Yeah.
So for us, like where we live, I think it's always super important because as far as like those active air leaks, you know, the pressure is going to be the highest as it gets to the blower. So if you have leakage close to the blower, it's going to either drive air directly into the system from the return or push conditioned air out through the supply and draw the house to a negative. So how are you implementing that into your services for indoor air quality?
Well, we just used it for the house this past week where, you know, they were getting an unknown particulate. And what's crazy is they were getting a smell in the house that they couldn't identify. As soon as we turned that duct blaster on and it depressurized the ducts, you know, and it blows in the air from the ducts into the house, they were like, oh my gosh, that's the smell. Right? So now we can go up in the attic and figure out where it's coming in. And you know what it smelled like to me? It smelled like an attic. Yeah. Because I just know I'm in attics all the time, right? But then they were like, it smells like a 100-year-old chair, you know? And so I was like, yep, you've nailed it, you know, old insulation and old, you know, mothy attic. And so, you know, be able to identify that, the homeowner got that instant, you know, like, I don't know what the word is, but when they basically get affirmation, I guess, right?
It's like the aha.
That was it. Yeah, and then we can go up and we can identify where it's coming from, and it's huge. You know, we've always done some level of duct leakage testing. It was just with a blower door test, right? When we ran the blower door test, we would use the pressure pan that you guys have. Yeah. We would go on supply to supply, even the returns, and say, "Oh man, this one is an anomaly. Why is this bigger?" And now I can go investigate that one line, right? Yeah. Or at least that line, and then the rest of the run. So that was very useful, but now that we're dealing with certain situations where there's litigation involved and maybe new ductwork installed, we got to get those numbers, right? We actually have to say, no, this is 10% leakage and the code asks for 4. And so, you know, you can't really do that unless you have a duct tester, but the duct tester lets you specifically test the ducts. And so it's, you know, it's a valuable tool just like any other, but the thing is we don't use it on every job, right? Yeah. You listen to the customer and you figure out what's going on. And, you know, you have a garage full of tools or a truck full of tools and you say, these are the ones that would be great for this.
Yeah, that makes sense. We had, I had a homeowner get in touch with me that got my number through somebody else that I did some work for, but it was somebody in Eastern North Carolina. And they, this was last year. It was a 3-year-old house. It was one of the most common production home builders. I'm sure you can guess probably which one it is. But they were having they were calling it indoor air quality problems and mold problems, but none of it was visible. And when I got there, she said, yeah, we had a mold inspector come and they brought the dog with them. And then she pointed to me everywhere the dog went, and every single spot, it was right under a supply that was in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I think I know what's going on here. And this house, like many houses around here, it's a single stage heat pump, or no, this was a single stage air conditioner, and it had a separate furnace, gas furnace, and it was zoned, right? So it had one zone for downstairs, one for upstairs. And a lot of times just one of those zones was calling. So that meant that the system was still going to run at the same rate and the same speed with half the ductwork that it was designed for. It had porous interior insulation instead of wrapped from the outside. So one thing I looked at was static pressure, right? A lot of times we see poor duct designs, and I checked it under a few different scenarios with the zones open, and then with one of them closed, and then with that one open and the other one closed. And a lot of the times it was running at 0.75 inches of water. So which is pretty high. That's higher than we want it. So I was able to just poke a small hole in the supply plenum with an endoscope and look, and there was some visible stuff. You can only see but so much with those cameras sometimes. But when we ended up breaking it into it, and we could see visible microbial growth right there inside of that plenum that was just getting distributed all throughout the house. And she had similar mad air problems like you were talking about before too. So with all the bedroom doors open, the house was it was -1 pascals. But then when I shut all 4 bedroom doors, it went down to -6.
Yeah.
So it was a tremendous change. Yeah. After balancing the rooms out, we replaced the supply plenum and then wrapped it from the outside, gave it a ventilating dehumidifier. And then we put in a zone system too that was, it can read its own pressure. So if it gets above a certain pressure, it'll bleed off into the other zone. So it'll never allow the whole system to get above 0.5. And I heard from the HVAC contractor that I worked with yesterday. She's like, yeah, I met with her and, all of her skin's cleared up. And I asked her about her 1-year-old, and she said, yeah, she's doing great. No more of the skin reactions that they've had living with. And I asked her, like, did you change anything? Any other medications? Like, no, just work on the house. And they cleared up. So
that's huge. Yeah. And sometimes that's a perfect example, Sam, of something that you identified that a typical mold inspector wouldn't. Mold inspectors don't even have manometers. I tell them I have a manometer, and they're like, is that a measure of how manly you are? What is that? And so I'm like, yeah, they are. That's why every time I hold one, they just explode. I don't know. Check your orders, man. I have to get one every month. Honestly, they don't know, right? And something like that's huge, and everything's related. So as the air, the air conditioner is designed to get the air 20 degrees colder, right? So if it's going in at 70 and it's coming out at 50, that's normal behavior. But what happens if you increase the static pressure? Now the airflow is going to slow, which means the air is going past that cold coil slower. And now the supply air is colder than it should be. Now you're hitting dew point, you're hitting condensation from not only inside the ducts, but also outside the ducts, right? On the exterior, on the supply vents, and all that due to some sort of static pressure issue because it wasn't zoned properly. And all this stuff is related. It all comes back. And if we're dealing with new construction, one of the most common health things that I see with new construction are rashes, GI issues, and headaches. Or postnasal drip. I hear that a lot too. And honestly, the reason is because these brand new construction buildings are built with all these new chemicals, right? You got 13,000 new chemicals into a new house, and we're building them tighter and tighter and tighter, right? So where are they going? It's like adding a bunch of chemicals to a mason jar and then tightening it up and then like putting your kids in it, right? And it's like, oh, I wonder why they're sick. And so, what do? You have to dilute the air, right? Especially in a situation like that where you can't do a lot to remove the source, which source removal is always number one in air quality. But another great idea is dilution. Dilution is the solution to pollution, which I don't like that term so much because I think the solution is actually source removal. But when your house is the source, Yeah, so rhyming. I can't not say it.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Flush it out as often as you can.
Yeah, so now we're dealing with these houses that are built tighter and then, built with new chemicals. We're going to have VOC issues in these houses. Every new construction house I've ever tested, like spec, I should clarify, spec has been a problem, right? Yeah. Now, this place right here that I'm in, this is a relatively new building. It's like a year old. I'm sitting at 0.4 ACH 50 in here. So it's pretty tight.
Super tight, yeah.
And the second day that it was sealed up with the new paint, the new flooring, the new carpets and everything, it was almost nothing. It was almost ambient levels of VOCs outside. How did I do that? Well, I did it because I chose the right building materials. I chose the right paint, right? I got all non-toxic stuff, which is hard to find. And I have an ERV system, right? So like all the things that you need to do to make sure you're making sure the source isn't there and you're increasing the ventilation as much as you possibly can. But when you do that, it's a complex cascading issue, right? So if my ERV failed, I would probably suffocate in here fairly quickly. It's a 300 square foot building. Yeah, 300 square foot building, 0.4 ACH, which is hard to get on a 300 square foot, just because the ratio of how it works. So what do you do, right? Well, how do I size my mini split properly or my air conditioner properly if it's only 300 square feet? I have exterior insulation on the building, right? It's 0.4 ACH. It called for 0.15 tons. Well, that doesn't exist, right? So now you got to deal with a latent load issue where there's humidity because the runtime of the unit's not long enough. Okay, now I got to add a dehumidifier, right? And then I'm bringing in outdoor air, which means I need more dehumidification. And it's like this thing, right? And then, the only thing I could really feasibly put in here is a mini split, has poor filtration. Now I got to get an air purifier. And so you walk into this building and there's like 5 machines running like, and so,
low load homes are tough to treat.
Yes, exactly. Like high efficiency, a lot easier when it's a 2,000 square foot house.
Yeah. There's the
288 foot building and stuff. But you have to consider these things, right? What's going to happen? Like every time I change something else can occur.
Yep. Yeah. It's all connected.
Yeah. Cause and effect. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So is mold just a Florida problem or is it, all over all 50 states?
You can ask Sam. I'm sure he's come across many in his state.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we see it everywhere. So just for context, our team travels nationally because we specialize in complex cases in mold sensitive individuals. So we just got back from Illinois. Reagan, I was just in Washington State not too long ago. We go all over the place. So we were just in North Carolina, Alabama. So pretty much anywhere we find it. She was just in Arizona. And you would think, dry, hot. Yeah,
still
moldy.
Still an issue,
especially because they love flat roofs out there for some reason. It's like, we should make our roofs slope the water away. Nah, we won't do that. We'll just make it flat. that's pretty much like half of Arizona. So,
doesn't rain that often.
So there's problems everywhere. And then you also got to think like their behavior and even like the culture is a little different. Like you don't see swamp coolers here, right? But in areas where there are swamp coolers, they have problems. Maybe you think of an area that's so dry you didn't have a problem, but their wintertime issues are due to their humidifiers. They got mold growth growing in the humidifiers. Yeah. They read somewhere that
almost 50% never get cleaned.
Never. Filters are always looking like a school project, like a petri dish. And then, you also have the fact that they read somewhere that 45% or 50% humidity was good. And so during the wintertime, they're running their humidifiers at 50%. Well, the dew point in the house now is increasing so drastically. Your dew point in the house might be 50, 55 degree dew point, which means any surface that's 55 degrees or colder is going to sweat. Well, in Minnesota in February, what temperature is outside, right? Negative. Yeah. And so your windows are sweating and all these things are sweating. And they're like, what's going on? And it's like, well, it's because someone told you 50% humidity was good. And it's drastically increasing the dew point. So, we see these problems all over the place. Where are you located, Ben?
It's just north of Seattle, like an hour north of Seattle.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay, so I was just out there not too long ago. You guys have an interesting situation because there's a few houses I've inspected out there that don't even have air conditioners. Yeah, and I'm like, what? This house I remember the first time I went to Washington, I was like, where's the air conditioner?
And for that, that 1 or 2 weeks a year or whatever, we just open the windows. It's like
exactly, yeah. And I know most of y'all's rain really comes during the wintertime.
Yeah.
It's more like kind of like a Mediterranean climate. And even then, it's not even a lot. It's just more like a long-term drizzle.
Drizzle.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody has their own little climate situations. And as we've explored like different countries and even virtual consults over the world, we've learned like everybody's situation is a little different, but the science and the physics don't change.
Yeah.
Right. If you understand psychrometrics and you don't understand air infiltration, now at this point, it's just a matter of, is it coming in or is it going out? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Brantley, how can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of your training resources?
Yeah. So we have our training platform at buildingscience.us. And if you're trying to hire us, you can go to envirohealth.co. EnviroHealth is my company. We do the mold inspections and the building forensic stuff. But you know, if you ever have any questions, just drop a comment in one of the classes. What's cool about our classes that we have on buildingscience.us is it's tied to like a social media platform that's built into it, like built into the class. And so if you comment on something, you had a question, everybody else gets to see it. The trainers are replying right there within the class. It's really nice.
That's cool. Yeah.
So you can ask questions in context, and someone else might be having that same question, and they get to see the answer. And so, yeah, we try to be as thorough as possible when training these people, because what I don't want is I don't want to provide someone with training on a tool like the blower door, and they have this one narrow view of what it can do, right? And it can problem solve, and it can increase your revenue and like crazy if you actually just brought it to these other things that, you know, like I believe anybody that's doing energy audit, you already have 60% of the tools to do mold inspections. Why are you not going out and doing a mold inspection for $600? Like that's just good for you. And then the opposite is true, where, you know, when someone looks at the blower door and they say, oh man, I don't know if I need that, you know, for the money, I could go get this thing or that thing. And it's like, well, there's no such thing as expensive. There's only such things as investments, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to make up your money on the first couple jobs you use it, because it's a valuable tool, and that value transfers directly to what the client's willing to pay, right? If someone calls me and they call someone else and they say, can you do a blower door to figure out where the air infiltration is during your inspection? If someone says no and I say yes, they're going to hire me.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's a few $100s more. It's just easy money, right? And so yeah, during our trainings, we try to get into that a little bit too, and like, hey, look, this is the value of the equipment. This is how you should be providing that to your clients. So, but yeah, those will be the two spots. Of course, Instagram, if you guys are just trying to watch random free content, you know, you can find me at Brantley IAQ.
Yeah, and what I love about your Instagram and your Facebook content is that you're in the field a lot, and you're sharing certain details of what you're finding. You're sharing why that problem is there, what tools you're using, how you're finding it. You're answering questions in the comments. So, yeah. So if you're not following Brantley, yeah, please do, because it's always super interesting.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I've had buddies reach out to me and they're like, why are you spilling all your secrets? Why are you telling these people what you're finding and what you're doing? Like, they're not going to hire you. Firstly, that's not the case, right? We have someone saying, I you know, either A, I have a similar issue to that, and I trust you now because I see that you can identify these types of things. And the last three people couldn't. But the other thing is, you know, they like the people that come in to look at this content, I don't expect anything from them. I just want to teach them, right? If I can get more and more people to identify an interstitial space issue, because I post about those a lot, you know, like, look at this hot, humid air coming into this place that it shouldn't go. And it's been so many people that have reached out to me and they were like, dude, ever since I've seen that video, like, I've spotted it on this inspection. And I'm like, yes, that is what I need.
That's
and
awesome,
if builders are watching that and they're like, oh shoot, okay, I need to make sure that doesn't happen, then customers like my customer in Tampa right now, who's going through a nightmare where we had to demo her whole house. I say we, but the remediator had to demo their whole house, rip everything out, start over. She doesn't have a place to live. She doesn't know how she's going to pay for it because the builder decided not to put an air barrier, right? And if I could just prevent that, then I did my job, right? And so that's really the goal of it.
It's a better product out there,
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, any last parting words? Any advice for maybe anybody that's looking to get into this side of the industry?
That's it. I appreciate you guys having me on. It's all about just trying to find the right people and ask the right questions. You know, bug everyone that you know. Sam, how many times do I call you? You know what I mean? I'll be on the field and be like, Sam, I got a question. I need help with this. Right. And so like, look, there's a little piece of me that's like, oh man, I'm bothering Sam again. But then there's
that's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Right.
And that goes for everybody else listening too. I mean, this is why we're here doing what we do.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, well, I'm going to be selfish because, I'm going to take a piece of information that he knows and now I know. Right. And you have to get those people around you. So a lot of people try to find that one training. Yeah. A lot of people try to find like that one book or whatever, but it's not the case. You have to go out and you have to investigate. You have to get in the field, get the experience, go a little bit beyond your comfort level and have the right people around you to ask the right questions. Because if you don't do that, then you're just not going to learn.
Step one is caring.
Yeah.
You've got to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a blast.
For sure. Yeah. This has been great.
Learned a lot, man.
And yeah, cool. I don't know why you're worried about calling me too much. I've definitely repaid you a couple of times.
No worries, man. No worries.
It's all fair
That's
play.
what it's all about.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
All right. See you next time.